Hello and welcome to Multilateral Thinking, your independent view of global trade. My name's Rebecca Harding and I'm the Chief Executive of Coriolis Technologies. I've been asking myself a few questions, and the biggest question is this: why on earth is world trade not grabbing the headlines at the moment? After all, in value terms, it's at 80% of the levels that it was pre-pandemic. In terms of where it was this time last year, world trade is 15% lower. Clearly something is going on with world trade. It hasn't picked up in the way that might have been expected. And so we need to think about the reasons why. And yet the IMF, when it produced its report last week, didn't even mention the fact that world trade might be an issue. Instead, it focused on the levels of debt in the global economy, quite rightly, and looked at how demand will recover and what taxation policy and what fiscal policy should be in order to run the economy back towards some kind of global growth. The reason why trade isn't making headlines, of course, is because it's become political. So let's have a look at some of those things that are driving the politics at the moment and that will define the way in which global trade operates for the foreseeable future. The first is, of course, Brexit. Why does it matter what type of relationship that the UK has with the European Union after the 31st of December this year? At the moment, the negotiations are stuck in a game of chicken, a zero-sum game, if you like, where one side wins and the other side loses. In a way, this is the type of negotiating stance that the British have wanted to take all the way through. But both sides are blaming each other at present. So who will win if there is no deal? That's a very hard question to answer. But the truth of the matter is that internal European trade in the sectors that the UK trades with the European Union, so aerospace, pharmaceuticals, automotives, electronics, machinery, components, in all of those areas has been growing very fast indeed. In fact, at an annualised rate across all of those sectors of over 10% since the Brexit referendum. These are key sectors for the UK's manufacturing base. And so the UK, it looks as though, is beginning to be excluded from some of those supply chains. In a zero-sum game, and in any negotiation in fact, it's important for both sides to have facts at their fingertips, to have an equal balance of power, but also to understand how each other are going to behave as different negotiating ploys are used. And it's that latter point that's really the most important. The sad thing is about Brexit negotiations that there's been very limited understanding of how the other side is going to behave. The UK is preferring a zero-sum game which is straight out of a Trump playbook, if you like. So maybe what we will see over the coming weeks is some kind of an arrangement that is a very limited one, a bit like the stage one deal, the phase one deal that we had with China back in January. Any limited deal leaves a door open for further negotiations and further discussions. That has to be in the best interests of everyone. But maybe what we might see over the coming weeks is a slight pause to wait to see what the playbook is after the US elections, because the tone may well change, even if the substance doesn't. And that may influence the way in which negotiators are thinking. What's certainly the case is that the new Trade Commissioner in the European Union, as he comes into his post and begins to settle down in his role, is unlikely to think that Brexit is the most important thing on his to-do list. So what will he be thinking as he settles down to work? The most important thing that he has to consider is, of course, the relationship with the United States. There's a trade war brewing there as well, and this is something that is of deep concern. Why is there a trade war? Well, it's worth remembering that the World Trade Organization some time ago ruled that the European Union had illegally supported Airbus. The United States then imposed tariffs on the European aircraft and aerospace sector. And last week what happened was that the European Union had its tit-for-tat tariff agreed as legal by the World Trade Organization as well. So the two sides are in conflict at the moment over aerospace subsidies. Now, aircraft is one of the sectors at the moment that has been most hit by the COVID pandemic. Travel is at an all-time low, and this is very damaging. So the tit-for-tat tariff negotiations are obviously going to do damage to the long-term relationship and the long-term economic growth that is possible between the two countries. The United States is an incredibly important trading partner, the largest trading partner that the European Union has. And as an export destination, it's important for automotives, high-end pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and many of the high-value goods that the European Union produces. The two sides can't afford to stay at loggerheads for much longer, but it goes broader than that, because there are areas like the European Union's trade with Iran, and of course the Europeans' use of Chinese technology in its 5G networks that will also affect the long-term strategies of the European Union in the future. So as the new Trade Commissioner takes his post, what's likely to happen is that he will be considering the relationship with the United States first and foremost, because it determines the strategies that the European Union will have towards its trade with many of its trading partners, including China. The third question then is, how is the US election going to shape the future of world trade? There are a lot of differences between Joe Biden's policies and President Trump's policies, and at the moment, although the polls are suggesting that Biden will win the election, we still can't be sure of the outcome. So let's focus on what's at stake. At stake is a relationship that the US has with the World Trade Organization, and don't forget, the World Trade Organization will have a new head within the next few weeks as well, but also its relationship with all of the trading partners, as well as its relationship with China. Were Joe Biden to come to power, we would see a more emollient tone. He is more of a multilateralist, and he wants to deal with China particularly through consensus rather than through more antagonistic means. He's likely to use tariffs as a mechanism for supporting sustainability in trade, rather than as a stick to beat the Chinese into submission. So we will see a slight change in tone, even if we don't see a change in substance immediately. There are lots of things, therefore, that are going to affect trade in the coming weeks. Brexit, the role of the new European Union Trade Commissioner, and obviously the outcome of the US election. At the moment, trade is in a position of uncertainty, and this is badly affecting businesses. It makes sense for our politicians to spend a little time maybe stepping back from the brink of zero-sum games and trade wars and look to the future, which should have multilateralism at its heart. Thank you for listening.